We stood on the carpet and watched. There's Harrison, there's John Rice Davies, there's Key, there's Karen Allen. It was like, this is the end of our journey. And then we went into the theater, and then they opened the curtain, and there's John Williams and the full orchestra playing in front of us. So all of that, I honestly feel I should have got up and left after the orchestra was done and just stopped there.
That is Brandon Kleyla, who's back to talk about everything Indiana Jones. You're listening to the Tomorrow Society podcast. Hey there, thanks for joining me here on episode 223 of the Tomorrow Society podcast. I am your host, Dan Heaton. We're doing something a bit different in this episode and focusing entirely on Indiana Jones. And when I thought about who would be someone who could talk about all the attractions, Indiana Jones, that we've ever had in the parks, plus the new film, Dial of Destiny, I only thought of one person, Brandon Kleyla, who was on the show a few years ago talking about his career, Trader Brandon, his work on Trader Sam's, so much cool stuff. Brandon directed a documentary, Indy Fans, which was all about fans of Indiana Jones, has been a lifelong fan, and it's definitely played a role in getting him into the theme park industry. So we talk about all the attractions, Epic Stunt Spectacular, Indiana Jones Adventure, the roller coasters, and of course, the upcoming possibility of Indiana Jones arriving at Disney's Animal Kingdom. And then Brandon gives his thoughts on the Dial of Destiny. Lots of Indiana Jones. If you're a fan of this franchise or any of the attractions, I think you're going to enjoy this episode. So let's get right to it. Here is Brandon Kleyla. Brandon, thank you so much for coming back to the podcast. This is going to be fun.
Yeah, no, this will be great, Dan. Thanks for having me.
Oh, for sure. Well, we're going to talk about everything Indiana Jones. We're going to address the latest film. We're going to talk about attractions, because I couldn't think of a better person to talk with about this, with the new film and the franchise sort of ending. We'll see, but I'd love to even go back. I know you have so much history with the character. How did you originally connect with Indiana Jones as like a character in the films?
Oddly enough, it was connected through the stunt show at Disney MGM Studios. That was my first introduction to the character. I had not seen the films. I knew nothing about it, but this nice, big, fancy new park was opening when I was 6 years old. And we went, and I stood there and I cried and screamed and kicked because it was loud and explosive, and I had no clue what I was watching. And I could still tell you exactly where I was sitting when my dad said, we got to go home and watch some movies. So that was it. And then obviously went back to the park and, fell in love and watch it every time we go and watch it every time I can. But yeah, it's all because of the parks. So it's kind of a fitting thing for me.
Well, yeah, so the stunt show, awesome, still playing. But what was it about that like connected with you so strongly beyond just being very loud?
You mean once I knew what the heck I was watching?
Once I guess, because that would have been 89's when it came out. So, yeah. Raiders and Temple of Doom would have been out, and then Last Crusade came out that year. So that was probably out too.
It was wild because, at that time there weren't any attractions. There wasn't a Temple of the Forbidden Eye. There wasn't a, Temple of Peril or any of that. So it was the only thing you got. You got the stunt show and you got the great movie ride. And at 6 years old, when you're watching those movies, and also being at the time, like you said, Last Crusade was out. So I remember going to the theaters and watching that. And then not long after that, you had Young Indy on TV, which was a big deal. So it was kind of a little golden era of Indy. And, to hit it when you're 6 years old is like, holy smokes. It was huge. So yeah, it was just a perfect timing thing.
It's crazy to me, too, to think about, because there were a decent amount of stunt shows that now no longer exist, but the Indiana Jones stunt show still playing. And I wondered even with everything, when everything shut down, if they would use that as a reason to not do it, but they keep it rolling and it's still going strong. Why do you think that one is stuck around compared to, that type of show is very common in the 80s and 90s, not really anymore?
That's probably one reason it is still around. I mean, is the fact that they aren't, so the more that disappear, the more unique of an experience those shows become. When I came over to Universal was to do Waterworld for the fourth time in our park in Beijing, China, because the show, regardless of what you think of the film, and as always, I think it's a great movie. I love it. The show is amazing, and the show is still going strong and a huge guest satisfier. But I think, yeah, to your point, the fact that there aren't a lot of these types of shows around anymore makes them all the cooler and more unique and more, impressive. And then also, I feel like it's too expensive for them to get rid of it.
Yes. What are they going to do with that giant
I feel like
space?
It's way too expensive for them. When you now having worked on a stunt show, when you think about all of the infrastructure at the Indy show of the gas tanks and it would cost a fortune for you to tear that show out. That's my thought now is, no, it'll always be there because it costs way more to take it out than to put something new in.
Well, I have to say, you mentioned Waterworld, last time we talked, I had not seen it yet. I was there last summer and actually kind of dragged my family to it because they were like, why are we going to see this Waterworld show? Incredible.
It's an amazing show.
I had put something on our agenda. Dan, basically, I'm going to rave about Waterworld for a few minutes, just because, you said, even that more than Indy, I feel like when you've got the plane crashes through and just the fact that it's in water and all that, it's one of those where I think, wow, it's crazy to think about with Indy and this, that those are done every day because the amount of money and also the talented people. The people working on these shows are incredible.
It's an insane show. And having done one, it's a hard show. And, like you said, water is really unreliable. And throwing a giant airplane at an audience untethered to anything is it's an insane thought to begin with. But the fact that we pull it off is amazing. I know we're talking about Indy, but I feel like Waterworld is probably the best stunt show there has been, just because it's so insane. The fire and everything. I mean, the Indy show is amazing. I like the Indy show from the point of view of how it's structured. The fact that the giant temple sets are the largest moving set pieces in the world to date that move as many times as they do. And then you move the Cairo set. The way it's structured is phenomenal from a theme park design standpoint. But yeah, Waterworld just insane. It's just, and the fact that we keep doing it is just amazing to me.
Yeah, it's in Beijing, and like we talked about in the last episode, just the whole little land and the the restaurant.
It just keeps getting bigger. Yeah, it keeps getting bigger every time, which is great. It should,
for sure. Well, circling back to Indy, you already referenced Last Crusade and Young Indiana Jones Chronicles. It seems like you were totally the right age for that. How did those connect with you so strongly? Because I think those hit right at the time when you would have been the right age for it.
Watching Young Indy, where Indy is the same age as you, that was a weird, awesome thing that made him relatable. Cause you were like, oh, well, he's like me. He's my age. That was wild. And yeah, going to Pizza Hut and getting the Young Indy, collector's cup and compass, that sort of stuff. Yeah, it was just the right place, right time. It was kind of like growing, again with 89 over at Universal when you've got the Ghostbusters live show and you've got Ghostbusters 2 in theaters and the cartoon is on TV and the toy section at Toys R Us is larger than any Star Wars section ever. I mean, it was just that was the time to be there, so it's crazy.
Jumping ahead a bit to 2008, around the time that the fourth Indiana Jones film, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, came out. I know you directed a documentary called Indy Fans and the Quest for Fortune and Glory, where you were still pretty young at the time, but you went around and talked to lots of fans and other people involved, like Tony Baxter and others involved with Indy. What was that like for you then, becoming a fan and then also shooting this documentary about people that love the character and franchise? That was a fun time too. That was around the time when there was a lot of fan documentaries being made. There was, Star Wars fanboy, or not fanboys, but I want to say Star Voids, but I don't know why I want to say that. The One Ring, there was a lot of fan documentaries about certain IP fan bases. And I just jumped very quickly on Indy. I was like, I'm going to do Indy. And it kind of just
it was a lot of fun to do. And then we had a great reception from, people that worked on the films. And I thought it would be fun to see how far we could push it with people that worked on the films and get their thoughts on the fans. What's it like seeing 50, 100 guys at Comic-Con dressed in a costume you designed? That's a fun thing. And then dial into certain fans and how they've been inspired by the character, why they got into archaeology because of this character, why they became a filmmaker because of this character. But yes, ultimately getting, that was the first time I met Tony, and we interviewed Tony, and that is what started to this day, friendship and mentorship through my time at WDI and all of that. So yeah, we have Indy to thank for that.
Well, now, hey, it connects directly to your career and the other attractions. Well, I have to ask you, because we're going to talk later about Dial of Destiny. Looking at it now, what do you think of Crystal Skull as a film? Does it get an unfair bad rap or not?
Oh boy. Everyone fast forward 15 minutes. Look, my don't edit out that pause. That pause is very strategic.
No, it's good.
My angle is always the films ended with them riding into the sunset. Now, with that said, we have extracurricular things, right? We have a fourth film, we have a fifth film, we have video games, we have all the books, we have all these other things. And some of them click and some of them work, some of them don't. But it doesn't damage the three, right? So I had always been on the mind of, my God, Crystal Skull is unwatchable and drives me insane. Then I saw Dial of Destiny, and I went and I said, boy, I've been really hard on Crystal Skull this whole time. I really feel bad. And I have a friend that did graphics on Crystal Skull, and for years he goes, I'm telling you, you're going to owe me an apology one day. And he was the first person I texted after watching Dial, and I said, I have to apologize for the last 15 years of giving you crap about this. I don't think it's perfect by any means, but I do feel now that there are certainly moments that feel right.
This is interesting. I just want to fast forward, but no, I'm going to hold off on Dial of Destiny for now. But I'm just so interested. I should have gone back and watched Crystal Skull before I did this, because again, in my head, it's kind of like, oh boy, that was a lot to take. Yeah. But comparing it to the new film, I wonder how they would connect.
There's definitely bad things in Crystal Skull. I mean, let's not lie to ourselves. I mean, there's some bad stuff. And then there's a few things you go, yeah, that fits. That checks out. That feels right. Yeah. And then there's, I don't know. I try to be positive. I try not to be a negative person. But yes. Let's talk about the parks.
Yeah, no, I did not ask the question trying to get you to rip on it. I was actually curious if maybe, like you said, there may be some things we missed, but okay, let's dive into the parks. That's what we're here about. So I know when we talked last time, you mentioned that you started working at Disneyland as a Jungle Cruise skipper. And when you were there, of course, you've got access. Hey, basically right next door is this incredible, still to this day, Indiana Jones adventure ride. So how cool was that to have it right there, basically, when you're there?
That's great. And after X amount of time at your first attraction, you can cross-train to your second attraction. And Adventureland shares a pool of cast members with Frontierland. So I had been a skipper for a while, and then they said, hey, we want to cross-train you over at Big Thunder, which they kind of pulled the, more alert people onto the, tougher rides. And I said, ooh, yeah, no, I don't want to go to Big Thunder. And they were like, but we really would like you at Big Thunder. I went, ooh, no. I said, I'm far too ginger to stand in the sun all day. But the inside indoorness of the temple sounds great. So I totally played the I'm too pale to stand in the sun card and cross-trained at Indy. So I got to work at Indy for about 6 or 7 months before leaving. And it's amazing. It's wild and crazy and unbelievable. And then returning there when working at WDI to fix a couple things and tweak stuff and pull some props out to replicate for Sam's and all that is it's you walk in there and it's a great, you're walking into greatness. You just know it.
So, I mean, it's still to this day, 28 years, if I'm doing my math right, 29 years later, one of the most popular attractions in the park, if not beyond like Rise of Resistance, the most popular attraction. Why do you think, similar to what I said about Stunt Show, why do you think it's held up so well, where I feel like it just keeps adding in new generations that love it?
Yeah, well, I think it's because of Tony, and it's done from what you would want to experience, right? And you look at, okay, it's an Indiana Jones ride. Well, what do I want as a fan to see, right? So the boulder doesn't make a whole lot of sense in there, but gosh darn it, we want to see it. Like we want to experience that. I don't know why every temple in the South America had rolling boulders, so it checks a lot of boxes off from that point of view, but it's also just a damn good ride. I mean, it's timeless like the films because it doesn't go in and be like, we're going to focus on the fourth movie. We're going to focus on this, it doesn't lock itself in, which I think is, a lot of my issues with Rise. But yeah, Indy is much more timeless. And, there's one character in the ride, there's one character in the pre-show, and they've always been with you through multiple films. It's not a specific thing. And yeah, it's just the ride system is amazing. The location's amazing. The queue is amazing. I mean, it's just there's no element in it that fails, right? Everything is turned up to 11 from the second you walk off of the Adventureland, main drag. It's game on at a top level of execution until you get off. I mean, until you're back into Adventureland. So yeah, it's a rare opportunity. It's one of those that you kind of go, boy, I wonder if we'll ever see that again. But no, I think that's why it sticks, is it's just that damn good.
Yeah, and the timeline thing is interesting because, like, I know in Tokyo, I've not been there, they call it the Temple of the Crystal Skull, but I don't think it's that different. But then, they were trying to kind of make it its own thing. But then, obviously, we're going to talk about a little bit that they've made in the future. But I don't think they ever really, with anything, they don't really need to lock it into the time, right? Because Indy's kind of, even like the films, it's like you look at it and you're like, wait, all these things happened during the few years of World War. It doesn't really matter. It's just like a pulp story, an adventure story, right?
We know the years they happen, but it doesn't matter because they capture the era of that, which is another kind of issue with Crystal Skull and certainly with Dial, where you're like, I had one of my buddies said, I don't like knowing that Indy is teaching at a crummy college in New York when I'm alive. Like, that's weird. Like, Indy lives in this golden age of adventure, this golden era of that, not, well, he's alive in 1969. Like, that's just strange. Not to say he wouldn't be, but I don't know if we need to see it, right?
I totally agree. Another thing, too, it's interesting, is Dinosaur at Disney's Animal Kingdom uses basically the same ride system.
Same track. Yeah.
Yeah. And Indy is so much better. And part of it is the movie. And not to just pick on Dinosaur. I do enjoy elements of that ride. But sure. How does Indy fit the ride system so well? Because I think the ride system does so much with Indy more than with anything else.
Well, it's because it was designed for Indy. I mean, if we go back to the beginning, if we go back to the early days of I want to say at least early 80s, probably 84ish. But, I've heard this story several times, and it's such a crazy, fun, wild story to envision it happening. But, the studio was at a lull. You were looking at Black Hole. You were looking at, those types of films. And Tony went to Ron Miller, who was head of the studio at the time, and said, look, I know we're trying to do our own thing, but I really think we need to go talk to George Lucas. Star Wars is a huge hit. We need a win in Tomorrowland. Raiders just came out. It's a huge thing. At that point, Eisner was coming over to Disney, who greenlit Raiders when he was at Paramount. So, it was just a thing. And then there was a luncheon up in Northern California with Tony and George and Walt's daughter, Diane, scooping out potato salad. And pretty much they went, yeah, let's do this, at that little barbecue. But then Tony stuck with, but how do we deliver Indy, right? The technology's not there. So how do we deliver what we just saw on screen with Raiders? And it took, Raiders was 84. Indy, it took 10 years. It took, almost 10 years probably to catch up. But then design that ride vehicle for that specifically. What if we took this car what if we took this Jeep and it's on a motion base and we can make it dance. We can make it feel like you're skidding. We can make it feel like you're going downstairs. We can make it, and then you write the attraction around that. A lot of people don't realize that when you come out of the gates of doom and you take that left into that big vista, if you look down on the floor, there's a staircase painted, and you feel that as you're in the Jeep and you hit those bumps going down. So yeah, it's so good for Indy because it was designed for Indy, as opposed to just, hey, give me that, let's go get that again. And you're like, does it? I mean, okay, Dinosaur's a bumpy ride, that's fine, but yeah, I mean, when you have the focus to design something brand new for a certain thing, then yeah, it's always going to be the best on that thing.
Well, right, yeah, and just, I mean, I know I've always heard that there's all these different things it can do and all that, but I feel like the ride has so much to it, and you go through everything so quickly that, like you mentioned with the stairs, I don't know if I noticed that. Now I will look for it. But there's so many little elements that I think you don't experience because the dinosaur ride is darker and everything else, but just you can see so much and there's always so much going on that it's impossible to catch everything, which is another reason why it's so popular still.
Right. I mean, you can ride it 100 times and always see something different. I mean, that's the amazing thing.
Well, I wanted to ask again, you mentioned Tony Baxter and your connection to him, because when I was in line for Indy last year, I looked to my left, and standing pretty far away is Tony Baxter, because he was there for Splashes last day. And I was like, oh,
okay.
And I didn't talk to him, but I'm just saying, he's still so connected to this ride and just to, like you mentioned, the history. But I'm just curious for a little more about your connection with Tony and then just, connecting with him over Indy and other things.
Yeah, no, he actually texted me the other day. His birthday was the other day, and he finally got his new replica of Nurhachi, and he was very excited. So yeah, our text chain is always about usually Indy stuff. It's like talking to a kindred soul that you've always, it's like talking to yourself in the mirror, more or less, especially when it comes to Indy. I mean, every attraction he's created, I mean, I'm obviously not unique in this, has inspired my life in some way, shape, or form, from early day Epcot stuff to Indy to stuff we did Fantasy Fair together in Disneyland. We did Sleeping Beauty Castle walkthrough together at Disneyland. Yeah, and it's just it's amazing. When I was doing Trader Sam's, I was stuck on a couple design things of angles and trying to figure out how to place some things. And it's amazing when you can run upstairs and go, hey, can I show you this real quick? And he grabs the paper and his pen and goes, well, what if you did this and this and this? And you go, yep, nope, that would have been a lot easier. Okay, thanks, bye. And you run back downstairs and go, yeah, stop the presses. We got to do it this way. And then at the same time, he's just a big kid that wants to watch indie movies and buy toys all day long, which is hilarious. But no, he's a dear friend, I've learned endless amounts from him, over the course of my career, and still, yeah, it's still a wild, unique experience for me. Again, being a fan of his, I think I have called him once on his phone because I can't, who the hell am I to call Tony, So yeah, it's a wild experience, but very thankful that he's here.
Oh, definitely. No, that sounds awesome. And I understand that. Yeah. I mean, you could call Tony. I give you approval. You can do it. I think
No,
you're on that level.
I can't do it. I can't do it. It's weird. It's strange. Yeah. It's like, no, I'm good.
All right. Well, let's move on to some roller coasters they made, which I know I've talked with one of the model makers for Indiana Jones who worked on some of the ideas they had where they were going to possibly do a mine car, and there was all these kind of crazy ideas for Disneyland where they were going to reroute things, and they never did those because obviously so much money and just crazy. But then they ultimately did have these coasters, which are kind of like mine cars, but I did ride the one in Paris, Temple of Peril, and they have Raging Spirits in Tokyo. I don't know. Do you think, I don't know if you've experienced them. I guess that's my first question. Have you ridden
I have not. I've gone, my only other park I've done internationally is Hong Kong. I have not ridden the others, but I am familiar with them. Yeah, they're interesting little things because they're so, I don't want to say they're, you can obviously tell they were designed on a budget.
Yes.
To get a little IP recognition in the park, and that's fine. But yeah, they at least they're there. At least there's a little stake of Indy in almost every park, which is great around the world. Yeah, you want a mine car ride. That's what we all want. That's awesome. But yeah, we all look at that original Brian Jowers piece of art with the Jeeps and the mine cars and the train going through and the jungle boats going through, and you go, sweet mother of God, what is this? And then you look at it from a design aspect and you go, I would destroy half of the park if one ride went down. And that was ultimately what, aside from cost, if the Jungle Cruise went down or the Indy ride went down, you'd have to shut down the trains. You'd have to shut down Jungle. You'd have to shut down the other, if you've got to turn the show lights on, you got to shut down 4 rides. And that's a big no-no. You don't want to do that. It's an amazing piece of art that, yeah, good God, it's beautiful. But yeah, no. We can't do that.
Yeah, one thing I heard is that they had talked about early on, I'm sure, about, well, maybe some people you can choose to go on the mine ride or you can walk this other way or you go. And I mean, as someone who's worked in the industry, logistically, giving the guests the choice to kind of pick which one and do different things, is there any way to make that work where we could actually do that?
I'm going to say no. I'm going to say no and then say I would love to figure it out how. Yeah, it's tricky because you're relying on your guests to not lock into one all the time, right? You're relying on them to not go, well, I only go in and ride the mine cars. That's what I want to do. When you need them also to go the other routes and the other ways so that your guest flow is not a mess. So yeah, that would be very difficult. That would be very difficult. I would appreciate the challenge, but that would be difficult.
One more thing on the coasters, just I rode the one in Paris, like I said, so rough. Not that pleasant, but I mean, I know you haven't experienced them, and it is cool to have Indy, and they do have good theming. I give them credit for that, but it does seem a little underwhelming for me to think about just because those rides aren't beloved. I'm sad to say. I mean, does it diminish Indy at all for you that they did that, or is it still cool regardless because it's Indiana Jones?
No, I think you're fine. I think a very small percentage is going to walk in and go, hey, wait a minute, this isn't up to snuff. The majority of guests will go in and go, awesome, there's an Indiana Jones roller coaster. This is cool. Yeah, it's a tricky one. And we talk about that all the time at work of, the percentage of diehards versus your everyday guests. My outlook is if I can make the 20% of diehards happy, I make everyone happy. So that's where my brain goes when I design stuff, is focus on the fans, because the guests are going to be the average day guests are going to be thrilled no matter what you do. So you might as well do it right and make your 20% happy too. But yeah, no, I think the majority of guests are going to go and ride it and think it's awesome and have a great time. And then they'll go to Disneyland and they'll ride that and they'll have a great time and they'll know they're different, but I don't think they'll get to the level that we would get,
Why don't they have, you can't spend hundreds of millions of dollars on an e-ticket every time for any franchise.
No, you cannot.
But that is another reason why Indiana Jones Adventure is so good, because it works for both the diehards and everyone else. It's one of those rare things where it hits both.
I could say unlike Galaxy's Edge, but we don't need to.
I would love to, Galaxy's Edge is so interesting to me because in what certain parts work so well and certain other parts, I don't know. It's real hit or miss, but
tricky. Yeah, it's a tricky one.
Yeah. All right. Well, we also should talk about, there is, you were involved in a very famous bar, not even just a bar, but themed environment with Trader Sam's. But there is also the Jock Lindsay's Hangar Bar, which I admit I have not spent much time at all. But I think it's kind of cool that they took a character who was a pilot in Raiders of the Lost Ark and themed a bar there. I mean, I'm curious for your opinion on this or your thoughts.
I have a funny story about this. So, yeah, I was not involved in Jocks. I was doing Grog Grotto at the Polynesian during that era of things happening. So a lot of people think I had my hands in Jocks. I did not have any hands whatsoever in Jocks. I would have done a couple little things different, mostly propping things that drive me insane as a fan. And I can say what I pushed back on when we put Indy stuff into Sam's versus I don't think anyone pushed back at Jocks. But I'll start the Jock thing with a funny story. Jason Sorrell is a dear friend, works right across this parking lot here from me now. And he loves telling the story of originally a fun fact, originally that location was going to be Trader Sam's. When they announced Disney Springs and they did their step and repeat wall of all the logos of businesses coming to Disney Springs, Sam's was on there. And we pushed and pushed and said, no, we need to be at the Polynesian. We are a small venue. That's what makes it work. That's what makes it click. And it's the Polynesian, for God's sakes. And ultimately, Lassiter was the one that said, no, it needs to be at the Polynesian. And then everybody followed suit. And that was when they had to do a switch for what is this space that we are building at Springs. And apparently they were in a meeting and Tom Staggs, who was head of parks at the time, said, what if we name it after the guy that flies the plane in Raiders, the guy that flies Indy around? And Sorrell goes, you mean Jock Lindsay? And he's like, yeah, that guy. Let's name it after him. And in true Sorrell fashion, he goes, if I had said that, you would have fired me. Because it's that level of nerdiness that that Jason is so known for. So yeah, so they did it, and it works. It's a fun space, it works. It's fine. Its trick, I feel, is, and why it's not as successful as it should be, is its location. It's a very big space. It's so you can always get in. But it would have done really great at the park, next to the stunt show, and been more intimate, been a really nice space, and mostly because you have no competition there, right? It's hard to sell a $20 cocktail when the venue right next to you has happy hour $8 buckets of beer. So that didn't help them. But no, it's a fun space. It works in a lot of fun story elements. It kind of drives me insane that every key prop from the films shows up in that one place. Makes my head explode from a storytelling aspect. I remember when we did Sam's, I wanted to put a couple Indy things in there, and we have the voodoo doll from Temple is in there. The map from the Indy ride is in there. And then there's a whip on the wall. And there was one executive that said, well, let's make sure we put his hat in there. And I said, absolutely not. There is no way. And he's like, yes, put his hat in there. It's iconic. And I said, it's iconic because it never leaves his head. He's not going to leave it in a random bar somewhere. Like, no. And then it was like, oh, well, that's a good point. But yeah, so it kind of drives me crazy when the hangar bar is home to the idol, the headpiece, the ark. You're like, what is happening? You're like, I get that you want to see these things, but what in the world is going on? New voodoo dolls that we never even saw in the film for Willie and Shorty. And you're like, what is, no. So yeah, that drives me insane from a prop guy aspect, but that's okay.
The ark is in some warehouse.
We know this. But again, the majority of guests, they're just there to have fun and have a drink. No one's looking at it like we are, or in this case, probably like me, but that's okay.
Well, yeah, you have a unique perspective just being someone that's also worked on Trader Sam's and done design there.
It's a blessing and a curse. Yeah.
Well, that's interesting comparing that to like Oga's Cantina, for example, not to keep bringing up Galaxy's Edge, but that's an intimate space with like $20 drinks. But because it's in Galaxy's Edge, it's going to be much more popular probably than...
Yeah, you can never get in.
Yeah. And even if you get in, it's like... It's tight. It's intimate. Yeah,
it's elbow to elbow. Yeah.
Well,
yeah, it's snug.
I had a listener, you kind of referenced it right now, but a listener asked me what your favorite Indy Easter egg was in Trader Sam's. So I don't know, you've mentioned the few, but what's kind of the best thing you feel like you put in there or something?
The map is pretty fun because I feel like we finally gave guests time to look at it and appreciate it, because Chuck Ballou did such an amazing job on that map. And at its location in the queue of the ride, in the little office that you pass, it's upside down, it's on a desk, you're moving, you never get to really see it. So I wanted to make sure we recreated that and put it right at a table where you can sit and really dig into that thing, because it's a beautiful prop. So that's one. And then I always laugh about the voodoo doll, because I wrote a letter from Short Round to Sam saying that, Indy trusts you to take care of this and destroy it properly. And there's a little letter that says that, but I wrote it with my left hand, so it looks like a little kid wrote it. So that one just makes me smile. But both of those I feel are completely in story, right? The voodoo doll has a purpose to be there, and the map also has a purpose because there's a note on there from Sala trying to drum up business for his tour company. So he's trying to go, see, look at all this. You can see the Chamber of the Future. You can see, he's showing you the map and then says, yeah, make sure I get this back before Indy notices I've, taken it out of his office. So yeah, they made sense for me. We didn't do any in Florida because we're a different time period and different story here. But yeah, they work in Anaheim, and then there's only a couple. So it's not beating you over the head with references.
Yeah, I like the fact that there's a few cool things, but again, it doesn't shift it where then it's the Indiana Jones bar or something. Which
Right.
not that that's bad,
Right.
but
and they're not the obvious choices.
Right.
They're deep. Yeah,
it's not the arc.
yeah, and the fact that they're not the obvious low hanging fruit. They're deep. They're deep cuts. So that makes it good too.
Well, speaking of Florida, at the last Destination D23 event, Disney sort of announced, not really, but sort of announced a Tropical America's Land coming to Disney's Animal Kingdom, though they seem to still not be 100% on it. And then they referenced Indiana Jones. They play the music, they show it replacing Dinosaur. Not official, but it seems like it's going to eventually happen. So I'm curious for your thoughts about Indiana Jones, likely similar to the California version, but in some way coming to Walt Disney World in that way.
I think it's only a matter of time. I think we've all said that, that I think a lot of people have thought it would replace the stunt show. That's been a rumor for hundreds of years. There's articles you can find online where it's stunt show closing, and you're like, nah, shut up. So yeah, I think it's only a matter of time. Dinosaur is obviously, as we said, the obvious. I mean, it is the same track layout as Anaheim. I know no more than you. I think it would fit. I think it'd be fine. I think it'd be cool to see how they incorporate the animals and the proper animals around that, so we don't lose the vision of what Animal Kingdom is. But yeah, we'll see. Yeah, more Indy is always good, so we'll find out.
And I wasn't trying to dig for any info. It was more I was just curious for your opinion. But yeah, it's weird because they did go to the Amazon rainforest in Crystal Skull, so they could totally connect that, right? Just really have a Crystal Skull land. That would be perfect, right?
Sure.
I don't know. Well,
you want to dial in on that? Go for it. Yes, but yeah, I mean, you're not wrong. I mean, yeah, there's so many great locations, and it'd be amazing to go into an indie land and see giant vampire bats and giant, get into bugs. As much as I would despise it, Animal Kingdom doesn't do a lot with snakes. Get into that. So I mean, it fits. It makes sense. Dare I say, it makes more sense than when we put in Pandora, but Pandora turned out beautifully. So I can't really. We were all wrong about Pandora. Let's just say that.
I was wrong. I know we talked about this the last time, but I was totally wrong. It's still incredible.
Oh yeah, no, we all were. We all were.
Even knowing the second movie doesn't really connect to it, which is good. That's a good thing.
Well, the thing, and I don't know if we mentioned this on the last time, but the thing about the land was our land takes place 100 years after wherever he ends up with the films.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, if you really pay attention with Flight of Passage, the water tribe that came out in Avatar 2 has been in Flight of Passage since we opened.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's all tied in. But no, we were all wrong about Pandora.
Well, I want to ask you one more thing before we talk about Dial of Destiny. Like ideal world, what is there something like an attraction or a land or something from Indy that you think would be really cool to see in a theme park?
Other than the Pankot Palace buffet dining experience?
Well, hey, that's cool. That'd be something.
That'd be cool. Yeah, it's a tricky one because, I mean, I would kill to see the Temple of Doom set built at scale, right? But who wants to go there? Like nobody. That's a terrible ride that would be. It's terrible. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think that, the fact that you could definitely still build the Raven Bar. There should be a Club Obi-Wan built somewhere one day. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely those types of locations that are probably easier than temples and shrines and all of that, invisible bridges and all of that stuff. Yeah, I think you lean more into the restaurant opportunities that we see.
And that's more common just when you see, I mean, there's been plenty of rumors about different other type of IPs with more a Pirate's Lounge or a Tower of Terror bar, or all those other things.
Oh, sure.
That is an easier sell probably, because also that they make money, so that helps.
Right.
Directly.
Right.
Well, here we are. We have covered Indy and the parks. We've covered your history. Now we get to the new film. So before we talk about what you think of the film, what was your experience like going to see it? Because, you've had, all the fans, they dress up, all those things. What was that experience like actually seeing a new indie film rather than about the film, but just the experience of it?
Honestly, I think it ruined the film for me. I got invited to it's funny, but I'm being serious. Like, I got invited to the premiere in Hollywood. I took my dad that started me on this adventure when I was 6, so we've been doing this for 34 years together, and we stood on the carpet and watched. There's Harrison, there's John Rice Davies, there's Key, there's Karen Allen. It was like, this is the end of our journey. And then we went into the theater, and then they opened the curtain, and there's John Williams and the full orchestra playing in front of us. So all of that, I honestly feel I should have got up and left after the orchestra was done and just stopped there and went, I'm good, because anything that happened after all of that was a blur. You don't top that, right? So I feel like they stacked the deck against us a little bit at the premiere. But yeah, it's an interesting, seeing toys on the shelves again, having that little moment of, hey, it's indie time again, is always fun. It's always great. We're about to get Ghostbusters again and have that moment of, oh, go get your popcorn bucket ghost trap, which is just fun. It's cool. And now with, my daughter and my nephew, and, to get to live through their eyes now and see that sort of stuff. It's like, oh yeah, this is great. But yeah, I've come to it of like, I went back and people were like, hey, what did you think about this scene? And I was like, I have no memory of that scene at all. So I'm like, did I sleep through the movie at the premiere? Like, was I that guy? Yeah. So it was interesting, but the whole build up, the red carpet, the concert, like all of that was just phenomenal. And again, in a way of kind of saying, knowing it's the last film, in a way of just kind of saying goodbye to that chunk of your life. And now you can just sit back and go, all right, we'll watch the movies when we watch them. We'll, whatever. But that was pretty amazing.
That sounds awesome, especially given your fandom. But just that whole experience, just have you gone back and watched the movie since that point? Was it a one-time experience?
Yeah, I watched it at the premiere and I haven't gone back. I really haven't. I've tried and I just go, oh, what the? Yeah, it drives me a little bonkers. I don't know in what, and I know I'm probably alone in this for the majority, which is fine. That's usually where I am with my film reviews. I'm usually the one that goes.
I think there's all types of responses to this movie. So yeah, proceed. Yeah,
it's one where it's like, I don't need to see my childhood hero be a depressed, divorced failure in Brooklyn. Like, I get the real world aspect of it, but you're like, but I don't need to see that, right? I don't need it. It's okay. Like, showing, and it drove me crazy that, Sala was driving a taxi cab. And I read an article the other day that John had said basically what I had said, because somebody asked me, like, well, what would you have done? I said, well, he would have been the head of the Egyptology wing at the Museum of Natural History. It's like, you can't tell me that a guy that spent his life in Egypt digging and found, would be a failure. Why is he a failure too? No offense to cab drivers. And then he read an article the other day that I read that John said that he thought that Sala would have been, and he named the archaeologist. There was an archaeologist that died protecting the collection from ISIS recently over there, and ultimately was killed defending the artifacts that of his people. And I'm like, yeah, let's go all in on that. That's fine, and to an extent, a lot of people were, they'd never kill Indy. But I was like, but why not? Like, if you have faith in what you're delivering, do it. One of the most amazing things, and why I was excited in the beginning, was watching Logan that Mangold directed. And I have no affinity for X-Men in any way, shape, or form. But the fact that he killed Wolverine, and the fact that scene at the end was so moving, I was like, go ahead, please kill Indy, because I need to see that it's done correctly. Would it have been bad if he had stayed back in with what's his face?
Yeah.
No, like, that would have been kind of cool. Like, it would have fit, it would have made. So I don't know. I can go on and on and on and on. Yeah, I don't know. It was a one and done for me. I'm sure I'll go back at some point, but I don't know. have a perfect trilogy. I've got books and stories that I like. I've got I don't need them all to be home runs. It's okay. It doesn't make me think less of any of it.
No, and it's the same thing where, not to again shift as to Star Wars, but I think a lot of people didn't like grumpy old Luke Skywalker, which I like Last Jedi, but I'm just saying
I love Last Jedi.
I'm just saying some people, I actually thought it was really well done, didn't like that. And I think though that's similar in a way to like Indy, where it's like him with the bat, like telling the kids to turn down the music and everything. I was just like, really? This is what I mean? But I got to ask you about this, because this is the thing that jumped out at me. The first like half hour or so, we see de-aged Harrison Ford and other characters too. And we've seen that. We saw it with Samuel Jackson and Captain Marvel, and it's becoming more common, and it has gotten better than it was, or like when we saw the kind of creepy Peter Cushing or something. But what do you think of that? I'm curious. What are your thoughts there?
I think some shots, I think they spent all their money on the shot in the trailer of them taking the bag off his head, because that looks phenomenal.
Yeah.
And then he opens his mouth and you go, no money left to fix his voice? Seeing young Indy, but he talks old, is weird. And then there's some shots that you just go, God, that really doesn't look good. And then there's some shots you go, that looks phenomenal. It's a tough game. I mean, I will give him credit that it's probably the best de-aging we've seen so far. And it will, of course, only develop and get stronger and better. But it's tough. You have to know how to shoot it. You have to know to hide it in darkness. Don't put him in spotlights. Don't focus in it. Don't get right in his face. Cut away when his mouth moves. Stuff like that. But yeah, there's some of it that is genuinely impressive, and then there's some you're like, cut away.
Yeah, it was the same way with when he's riding the horse. There was a scene or two where I was like, no, that doesn't even look like him. And then other scenes looked very good. It's just very hit or miss. But I agree. This is a long step from like The Irishman, where I was kind of like, I watched Robert De Niro looking like 40, and I'm like, no. Don't,
not too much.
Don't do that, guys.
Which again, with The Irishman, you're like, even if it looked good, he still walks like he's 80.
Right.
So, it's like, if you're going to do it, just go all in and get body doubles, get voice doubles, like just go all the way. It's okay.
Yeah. Well, I don't mean to just pick on, I'm kind of picking into the less satisfied things. I didn't mind the time travel part though, because like you mentioned,
I didn't either.
I actually thought that was one of the better parts of the movie, because I didn't think they would actually go back. I thought, oh, they're not going to, and which shouldn't surprise me. I mean, they did things that were supernatural.
Right. They do bizarre things anyhow. Yeah.
But I thought that was good.
That didn't bother me at all.
Yeah,
that didn't bother me at all. I'm not bothered by the refrigerator flying through the air. I mean, those aren't my issues with, the low-hanging issues of the majority are never mine. I look at it and go, well, it's lit wrong. The shot is bad. Like, I look at that stuff. I go, of course he can fly through the air in a fridge. Who cares? Look at everything else he's done. Of course he can time travel. That's fine. I don't care. Like, let's do it. I wish it had been a time travel movie. Like, let's go back, and it's young Sala and young Marion. Like, let's go. Let's commit. That'd be awesome. Because that's the least of my issues is time travel.
I don't want to turn this into just us complaining, but you mentioned, because I mean, trying to think of the way I asked this. What elements do you think, like you mentioned, since you just said it, the things that really bothered you about it, I guess, I mean, since we're on it, we might as well dig in, while we're here.
I think it was just, there was not really a moment in it where I felt the magic of an indie movie, whether it's pouring water out of a cup onto your dad's chest and it heals the bullet, I mean, like crazy stuff. But it was so overridden by the grumpy old man, by, really, I think, trying to set Helena up to take the franchise, which you're like, I don't care. Like, why is this a thing? I would have cared if she was Marcus's daughter. I would have cared more. I didn't need a new batch of characters and for me to really expect to care about them like I care about characters I've had for 40 years, so that's a tough sell. So yeah, it's just, there's just little, I wrote this out on my phone and it looks like the freaking ramblings of a madman what do you call it? What do you call them when a serial killer writes up
Like
a
a
thing?
manifesto or
There you go.
something?
It looks like it's bad. It looks like a manifesto. But yeah, it's a lot of, and again, we deal with it in parks, we deal with it in films. It's across the board. It's my favorite line is, it's art. One of us is right. That was their vision for that. Would I do it different? Absolutely. Did anyone ask? No. So that's fine. I can't. Hey, making movies is hard. The fact they get made at all is an accomplishment. They can't all be winners. They can't all be god awful. Just the fact that it's done is amazing. So again, we have a great trilogy. It doesn't lessen it anymore. Anything they do moving forward, it's fine. It's all fine. It's all good. And people like style. Good for them. I'm happy for them. That's great. I'm not
No, I don't
running
take
around
it
telling
as
people they shouldn't.
you're not on the equivalent of saying, I'm right and they're wrong. But, really it wasn't that
No.
big of a hit in terms of, I think, what Disney expected. So, I mean,
No.
beyond what any issues that you or I have or whatever, setting aside that, why do you think Indy is it a movie theater? Just people aren't going to the movies? Because plenty of movies tanked last year. It's not just Indy. Some did much worse. So I'm curious, though, why you think it didn't connect as strongly as maybe Disney thought it would.
I think it's the time period. I think it's, it's the old manness of it. I think it just didn't feel like an indie movie, I think. I mean, that's the simple, I don't even know what that really fully means. That's just the quick answer of, but it didn't really, just because you put an old guy in that outfit, if he's not indie, it's just an old guy in an outfit. So I don't know. I'm going to start my manifesto here. So I don't know.
Okay, well, ending on a more positive note, I mean, you mentioned the trilogy, which, I mean, why does it continue the films that you love to resonate so strongly? Whether it's through the films or even in the attractions and everything, why does the character still feel like something that you really appreciate?
I think because there hasn't been anything better. Indy is still the pinnacle of an action adventure. That's the top of the mountain. I always say that, it's my favorite of the three, but Temple of Doom is the greatest action adventure movie of all time. Like from the moment it starts, your hands are sweating. It never lets go. It never lets up. And it just keeps, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and big. Like it's insane. Seeing Temple of Doom on a big screen is an experience that everyone should get to do because it is insane. You go, oh, they fell out of an airplane on a raft. Well, that's silly. Well, the next scene's going to be even worse. I mean, it just keeps going to by the point where they're on the bridge, you're literally sitting there sweating. Like it's just insanity. But nothing else has been made like that. Nothing else has been made like Raiders. They've tried and they just come off as, knockoffs. So it's firmly planted its flag in pop culture and our brains, and it's going to be hard to ever beat it. That's just how it is.
Yeah, I think that also
and
connects.
Same thing for the rides. I mean, same thing for the attractions. I mean, it's going to be hard to ever have something better than what's in Anaheim.
I agree, because it's like all the things had to be in place. Like you said, they designed the ride system at that point. It was new. It was designed for this attraction. It's like trackless dark rides where it can work great for one thing and not great for something else. And the films, you had George Lucas, you had a young Lucas, a young Steven Spielberg, you had a fairly young Harrison Ford. And also just at the time that their look at kind of pulp films, that was really novel and still kind of feels that way. It's like it's like happy accidents, but everything has to come together at the right time, right?
It's all lightning in a bottle. I mean, every time. I mean, and you can capture it more than once, sure, but it's rare. It's tough.
Regardless of the new film, I think it's cool that they're still going to put attractions in, and I hope that anything new is awesome. It doesn't have to be the same as Disneyland. It might not be as good. I don't expect they'll ever do a queue like that again. That's because that is still
I don't think you have the room. I don't think you have the room to ever do a queue like that. And to that point, as we just said, that queue was designed for that. That queue's purpose is to get you under the train track and out into the parking lot where the ride box is. So, you back yourself into facility, demands and benefit from them is amazing. But yeah, I mean, you wouldn't need to do that at Animal Kingdom. You don't need to get out of the park, so Yeah, it's interesting. It's, again, a lightning in a bottle situation. Yeah.
Well, for sure. Well, Brandon, this has been really fun to talk. Even when we're not saying positive things, it's really fun to talk about Indy and dig in. Just talking about one topic, and I still think you're the right person to talk with, but I know you are doing still a lot of other things, whether it's in your kind of full-time career or as Trader Brandon online and everything else. So where can listeners kind of check out what you're doing or connect with you online or anything?
TraderBrandon.com is the website. And then the Instagram is my biggest social media. And it's just at Trader_Brandon.
Well, awesome. Well, I will say I'm very excited about some of the things that you are currently working on that we're going to learn more about soon. It sounds awesome. And this has been really fun. So thanks so much for talking with me.
Yeah, anytime, Dan. Anytime.
Well, that was cool. I do want to give a shout out to Brandon once again and his site, Trader Brandon, where he has a book, Mystic Libations, which he wrote with actor Todd Stashwick, who was on 12 Monkeys, was recently on Star Trek Picard, and they wrote a book together with a lot of cool drink ideas, and that's one of many things that you can find there. Also wanted to mention, while I was prepping for this show, I did listen to an episode of Disney Coast to Coast, the podcast done by Jeff Toppoli, and he talked to stuntman Kevin Broussard, who was one of the first stunt performers that played Indiana Jones at the Epic Stunt Spectacular, and I found that interview to be really interesting. And just to remind me of the amount of skill and talent that goes into the stunt performers on that show, I mean, like we mentioned with Waterworld in this episode, it's really off the charts how much skill is involved and how easy they make it look going back to when that show opened in 1989. Just really cool stuff. And I know Jeff always does a great job with his show, and that interview is worth your time. It goes back to July of last year, around the time that the Dial of Destiny was released. Very cool stuff there. He's also done a lot of interviews with similar guests to this show and a lot of episodes on Disney News. Well, if you enjoyed this episode, there are a lot more where that came from. You can go back to tomorrowsociety.com/podcast, find the past 222 episodes of the show. It's crazy to think about. You can also just look back in your podcast provider of choice and find them. And while you're there, why not leave a 5-star rating and review through Apple Podcasts or Spotify? It really helps out the show. And if you leave a review, of course, I will read it on the show. If you'd like to support the show, go to patreon.com/Tomorrow Society. You can get access to some really cool perks, lots of bonus episodes. If these episodes every week, you don't hear enough of me, you can hear even more on the Tomorrow Society Bulletin and other shows that I put out just for members through Patreon. It's just a fun way to help support the show and keep it moving forward. You can also make a one-time contribution and buy me a Dole Whip. Go to tomorrowsociety.com/Dole Whip to do that. If you'd like to get a hold of me, send me an email, dan@tomorrowsociety.com. Follow me on all the social media. You know where they are: Twitter, Threads, Facebook, Blue Sky, YouTube, Instagram, everywhere. I'm all over the place talking about what's happening with the podcast and the world of theme parks. The music you're listening to right now was written by Adam Hookey, performed by the Sophisticated Babies. Next time, I will be talking with Imagineer Susan Bonds about her work on a bunch of cool attractions, including the Indiana Jones Adventure, Extraterrestrial Alien Encounter, and Mission Space. Susan also worked at Epcot Center while she was in college and then was closely involved in those big attractions during the Disney decade and beyond. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Tomorrow Society podcast with Brandon Kleyla. Would love to hear what you think about this focus on a specific franchise and character, which I haven't really done before, and it was a lot of fun to do. Hope you're all doing awesome out there, and I will talk to you again next week.